Linda Hirsch, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education. The Mayor's Campaign for Equity and Excellence is a multi-pronged approach toward improving student outcomes in areas including reading proficiency, computer science, and college readiness. Research indicates that efforts to improve student performance often rest on more than academic interventions. Community schools are emerging as key players in efforts to address the non-academic needs that hamper student success. In 2014, EdCast covered the inception of the Community Schools Initiative. Since that time, the mayor has broadened his commitment to this whole child, whole community approach to education. Today, we'll speak with Chris Caruso, the Executive Director of the DOE's Office of Community Schools, to learn about the comprehensive services these schools offer to schools, to students, parents, and their communities. Next on EdCast.
The beauty of community schools is they reach the whole child and the whole family. And I think this is something that hasn't been understood enough, and we have to do a better job of showing how this model works. In the end, if you think about why a child gets well educated, it's because everyone is involved. Families involved, teachers, whole school community, but also other people they need help from, the guidance counselors, the medical professionals that often are the people who hold the key to a student's success, but too often we're not in the equation. One of the beautiful things about community schools is the focus on having mental health services and physical health services readily available to the students. This is a model that is a game changer unto itself. And we have had 130 community schools, which, by the way, 130 schools is bigger than all but a handful of school districts in the entire country. We already had 130 schools that had the community school designation and all that went with it. We're here today to announce some very good news. We are adding 69 more community schools to the city of New York. Wow. And that's going to be a game changer for those schools.
My guest today is Christopher Caruso, founding Executive Director of Community Schools at the New York City Department of Education. Mr. Caruso has spent his career working with schools and communities to improve educational outcomes and create opportunities for young people in neighborhoods with the greatest needs. Welcome to EdCast today, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Let's begin by discussing what is a community school.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, community schools are a really exciting innovation in New York City and around the country right now. What a community school is, and you notice it right when you walk into the building, it's a school that maximizes the community's resources and leverages partnerships to support student learning. We're working to build opportunity and fight inequity across New York City. And we do that by addressing students' basic needs, from healthcare to mental health to student engagement. We want these schools to be welcoming places where students and families feel like they have a belonging and their voice matters.
So what would be in a community school that would not exist at another school?
Yeah, there are a number of things. Number one, there are strategic partnerships in place. So every community school in New York City is matched with a nonprofit partner. That could be a YMCA, it could be a university, it could be a social service agency. And that nonprofit partner provides a whole host of supportive services for students and families. Those include health and wellness, it includes attendance improvement strategies and youth engagement strategies, it could include a food pantry, immigrant services. So it's a whole host of social services and educational supports for some of our most needy students.
Why do you think it's so important to focus on these non-academic factors?
Yeah, well, we know a couple of things, right? Across this country, we're facing some growing gaps of inequity. We see the gaps between rich and poor increasing, and the social mobility that once existed in this country is now threatened. And what does that mean for schools? It means students are coming to school with fewer resources, and they have to work twice as hard to catch up. This has a direct impact in academic performance because the things that we assess, the things that we measure and expect from our students rely on prior knowledge and experiences that our children accrue over a lifetime of their early childhood experiences.
What are some of the most important services that you see, or the ones that are needed the most in these schools?
Yeah, a number of things. One is the experiences and opportunities to build relationships with peers and adults. We need to make sure that our students' social emotional needs are attuned to and cared for. The trauma of growing up in poverty in this city and across this country is severe and has a direct impact on student performance. And so we need to make sure that we build in the space and the intentionality to support students' growth in those areas.
I read that you began working at a community school in Washington Heights. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience and how that experience has informed the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first job at a grad school was as a program director at PS8 up in Washington Heights, and it was an incredibly formative experience for me. I worked for the Children's Aid Society at the time and got to see firsthand the power that community schools can have. Specifically working with young people and families, realizing that we could create a space in a school building where students can form their own identity, a place where they could feel like their voice mattered and they can carve out their own identity. Struggling with identity and kind of defining who you are is something that every child deserves the right to do in a safe and supportive way. And we were able to bring the mentors and the supports in to really embrace that. I remember fondly, we used to have, we had a robust summer program. Our school was open until 6 o'clock every evening, and it was a year-round school, so it was open during the summer. And on those days when we had registration for the summer programs, the lines were out the door in the morning. And it really spoke to the need that children and families had, the desire to engage in learning over the summer, to build relationships, and the things that our middle-class families all have, right? Going to summer camp, take for granted the sports and the arts and the recreation experiences that shape identity and shape who children are. Those are the things that we hope to provide in every community school.
When the Community Schools Initiative began in 2014, Mayor de Blasio pledged 100 schools. And he recently announced, as we saw, the creation of 69 new ones. Can you tell me how many we have to date and the numbers of students that are being served?
Sure. So this school year we have 227 schools that the City of New York is supporting directly. In total they serve about 117,000 students, which would make it one of the largest school districts in the country, as Mayor de Blasio referenced, right? There's great diversity in those schools. It's elementary schools and middle schools and high schools. And while they've come on board at different points in time, they all offer the same set of services. They all offer expanded learning opportunities, robust family engagement, health and wellness supports, and youth engagement and attendance improvement supports.
Where are these schools located?
They're in all 5 boroughs in every corner of this city. They are.
And what does the school need to do to be selected as a community school? What's that process?
Yeah, so we've tried to be really strategic about how we implement this strategy across the city. And so there have been a number of on-ramps for schools to become community schools. Often, in several occasions, we've done a request for proposals where we invite schools to apply to become a community school. And when we do that, we'll target schools based on certain demographic criteria. So we'll look at the schools with the highest rates of chronic absenteeism and then review the proposals and applications for those schools. In other schools, schools that have been struggling for years, that part of our renewal program, we made a commitment to make all of those schools community schools. And so that was based on performance and academic performance over the last several years. And then in other cases, we look at community assets and needs. And so where are there gaps in services? Where are there really high rates of student homelessness, high rates of family poverty? And in schools where there are fewer services than others, those could be ripe for the partnerships and the strategy to be implemented.
I know that some of your partnerships have made some amazing contributions, like the Warby Parker. Tell us a little about that with eyeglasses.
Yeah, so we rely on a whole network of public and private partnerships. I referenced already the community-based organizations, the nonprofits that are in each and every school.
That would be like Children's Aid Society?
Yeah, FIPS Neighborhoods, the Partnership with Children, the Center for Supportive Schools. We have 61 of those organizations that have really emerged as leaders in these buildings. They hire community school directors that work hand in hand with the principal on school improvement strategies and providing opportunities for young people.
And so Warby Parker helped
Yeah.
give what, eyeglasses?
That's
to
right. That's
who?
right. We've had great private sector partnerships as well. So Warby Parker showed tremendous leadership by offering to provide any child who needs it with a free pair of eyeglasses in our schools. You know that traditionally the Department of Education does vision screening for new arrivals in kindergarten and students in the early grades. We've screened the vision of every student across our community schools, and we found that over a quarter of the students needed glasses. And so to date, Warby Parker has provided over 30,000 pairs of eyeglasses. This is a tremendous partnership we have also with the Department of Health. So part of this work is acknowledging that schools can't do it alone. Right? We can't solely rely on the power of a charismatic principal and the diligence of a high-quality teacher, but we need additional supports. And so our relationships with other city agencies, such as the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, who actually do the vision screenings and provide the staff to do that work, and then make the connections with Warby Parker, who provides the beautiful frames and lenses, is terrific.
We have a video of a school that is offering a very unique service, one that I had never expected, laundry. So let's take a look at PS15 and see what they're offering.
Terrific.
We've written a grant that enabled us to get a washing machine and dryer into our school that our families can use. We've tied it together to parent involvement so that for every time a parent was involved in the school in some way, either attend a PTA meeting or come to one of our family nights, they would be able to have a session in the laundry room with the washer and dryer. We had students who would be absent from school because their clothes hadn't been washed yet. It's about being creative. It's about looking at the resources that we have and you have to think out of the box and say, okay, here are the challenges that we face on a regular basis. How are we going to address these in a way that's different from what we've been doing? I think in a lot of ways we were a community school before community schools, became a designation. Making the school a hub for our families where they can come with other issues other than just what's happening in the classroom really helps the family as a whole, and it helps the child as a whole.
That was an interesting service, I would say. Are all the community schools the same in terms of what they offer?
Yeah, like every neighborhood in New York City is different, every school is different, right? So there are core elements and structures that are consistent across all 227 community schools, but they differ based on the community's assets, based on the demographics of that school and the specific needs. So not every school has a washer and dryer, but they're all working to provide the targeted supports and services to students and families that community relies on.
From your experience, what does it take for a school to work effectively with a community partner?
So I think it takes a couple things, and I would start with leadership, right? It takes leadership on the principal side, on the teacher side, and on the community organization side. Folks have to understand that we're working together on a shared set of results. What are our goals for our school community and student performance and creating more opportunities for young people? And then how can we align our resources to most effectively meet those goals? That's, working collectively makes sense, but it's really hard.
Yeah. Now, does every school that wants to be a community school, are they all prepared to work with a community partner as well? Or do they get any instruction on how to do that or support?
Yeah,
if somebody else comes into a building,
yeah.
I can imagine that it upsets the balance in
That's
some
right.
way.
And we have leadership changes, we have
Right.
organizational changes. So learning how to do this is a big part of the work that we're doing at the Department of Education. And I would say that community schools in New York City is not a new idea. Right? The Children's Aid Society has been doing this work for decades. In the Dinkins administration, we had the Beacon schools, which were an early adopter of the community school strategy. And at the turn of the last century, Jane Addams was doing school-based work like this in the settlement houses in Chicago, and that spread to New York City as well. So it's not a new idea. What is new is that the city of New York is now building a system to support this. So in the past, we might have relied on an innovative principal or a generous philanthropist or a nonprofit organization that had some resources and connections to make this happen. And we had pockets of schools across the city, such as the one that I worked on in the late 90s. But today, what we're doing is we're building a system and structures so that more schools can come on board, and we're providing the capacity building and the technical assistance that you reference so that schools are prepared to excel. So we provide training and budgeting. We provide facilitation and looking at data in a shared way. We provide access to new data systems so that the community school director and the principal can align and figure out how best to provide attendance supports to students and provide mentors to the right kids.
Is the funding all from the DOE, or does the funding come from other outside sources?
Yeah, we balance and have a diverse set of funding that includes city tax levy funds and federal and state funds as well. Just like we ask schools and communities to diversify their funding, we try to model that at a system level.
I would imagine that you have to. I want to clarify something, and that is the difference between a community school and a renewal school.
Yeah.
You had mentioned renewal schools.
That's right.
Tell us again what the difference is and the ways they come together and the ways that they don't.
Sure. So every renewal school and every RISE school are community schools.
And those are schools where the students are struggling academically.
Yes, the renewal program is a program that supports the schools that have had the most struggles over the past 3 or 4 years now. And part of their school improvement plan was to turn these schools into community schools. Community schools is not a school turnaround strategy in and of itself, but it's a critical component of school improvement.
But not every community school is a renewal
That's
school.
correct. So out of our 227 schools this year, about 70 of them are renewal schools.
Okay. We have another video about a partnership at PS 78, so let's take a look at
Excellent.
that. Okay.
We're a school that tries to serve as the hub of the community in many ways. We were first identified as a community learning school. In this past year, we applied for the AIDP grant, which is an attendance improvement grant. One of the direct pieces that one of our partners are involved in partnership with children has to do with the attendance improvement already. And in the 3 years, we've climbed about almost 2% each year. And right now, when I started off here, the school had about an 88% attendance rate. We're now at 92%. And to move at that rate that quickly is not common. We are on the road of a community school with a number of partners moving forward. The work that we're trying to do, where we're going, is to provide additional supports, deeper supports to our school, to our students and our community. The role of the lead partner will allow us a little more flexibility in how we're able to address the needs of our school and the community. Our efforts so far have been mostly around supporting our students with their social emotional needs as they come to school, so they can be ready to learn, they can be ready for instruction and academics. The work is academic, the work is social emotional, the work is empowering and entrusting people with the work of growing a community. And in any way we could do that, not just me, but my entire staff, that's what has to be done. I want this to be a great place to learn. I want them to feel at home here. I want this to be the place that they want to be. That's my goal, a great place to learn and a great place to spend your day.
So what jumped out at you when you saw that video?
The thing that jumped out at me most was the joy in the children, the energy that you could feel in that school. Principal Bershey is an incredible leader. I don't know if you noticed he had the clothespins on his, and he uses those as incentives whenever he sees a child doing something that's laudable. He hands one out and he hangs them up in his office. His office is full of them. And so it's kind of these little things on how you're building community in your school, how you're making children and families feel welcome. He referenced the work that they're doing with partnership with children to improve attendance in that school.
That's a good segue for me, because I wanted to talk to you a little bit about any studies that we have that talk about the effectiveness of these schools. So let's take a look at some of the categories, the things that we're always worried about. He mentions attendance.
Yeah.
So he says there was a big improvement in attendance rates. Is that a finding overall?
It is. So in the 3 years since we started this initiative, we've seen chronic absenteeism, right? That's the number of students who are missing more than 10% of school days each year, drop by almost 10%. across all the schools that have been doing this work from the beginning. And just as a point of comparison, citywide over that period of time, it was about 2% drop. So we're really making tremendous progress in improving attendance rates across our community schools.
Great. Now, what about things like, let's talk graduation, retention, reading and math scores? You know the list. So tell us, what has the research been saying about the effectiveness of
so I'm
schools?
really excited about the research base for this work. A couple of studies have come out recently. So last summer, the Learning Policy Institute the lead author was Jeannie Oakes, and Linda Darling-Hammond helped oversee that work. They did a national study that found that community schools were an evidence-based strategy defined by ESSA, the new education law. And what they found is that in well-implemented community school initiatives across the country, there were academic improvements, increased graduation rates, and they also looked at the cost-benefit analysis and found the return on investment to be really significant in the programs.
Now, what about parent involvement and teacher morale? These are some of the things that we always talk about, or problems in schools. Has there been an effect on that?
Sure, and just to build on the Learning Policy Institute study, the key there is when this work is done well, right? When it's implemented with fidelity. So the City of New York wanted to make sure that we were kind of assessing how we were doing. So we're working with the RAND Corporation, who's doing an independent evaluation. Their study came out last September to look at how the implementation of our work has been over the first couple of years, and found that by and large our community schools were implementing our core elements and structures with fidelity. And that includes family engagement. One of the really exciting things about family engagement is that this isn't just about getting more parents to come to parent-teacher conferences or meetings. It's about building the leadership capacity and the engagement of parents. I know as a parent of a public school student that we listen to other parents. We want to know what's going on, and that's how we learn what's happening in our children's schools often. And so for the schools that we're working with, we want to equip parents with the organizing skills, the leadership skills, so that they can help set the priorities, that they can help direct the resources and have an opinion. So we have a whole leadership program for families across the schools.
Are there seminars and workshops for parents?
There are, We have a leadership program that has close to 100 families from around the city, 100 parents that are working on that, build their communication and advocacy skills. And then each spring, right now, we have hundreds of forums going on. These are big public events, opportunities to kind of celebrate the progress at the school, but then look closely and critically at where the gaps are. What can a community do to rally around its school to make it a better place? How can we share our hopes and dreams for our students and come to some consensus around what the goals are for next year? And that's part of the planning process that happens every spring.
You bring your parents into the school building to start with, because you have
That's
multiple
right.
services.
That's
for them.
right.
You get them right in the door,
Exactly.
which I think must be a step up to begin with. And the reading and math, those academic indicators, have they been showing improvement?
Yeah, in our schools, so graduation rates are up by more than 11%, more than twice the citywide average, and our reading and math scores are improving. I will say that we're working with some of the most difficult schools, right? We're really targeting this strategy at schools with high rates of poverty and schools that have struggled. And so the reading and math scores are definitely up. We'll have another, RAND will do an impact study that'll come out sometime next year, and we'll get to look at kind of the statistical significance on the gains that we're seeing from year to year.
So we're scaling up, to use that phrase, planning more and more community schools. What are some of the strategies that you want people to keep in mind as we create more community schools?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost is that this is about a mindset shift, right? And so we saw the video, we saw the washers and dryers, and we've talked about the eyeglasses, which are all tremendously important. At the end of the day, we want people to think differently about how schools and communities interact, about whose voices are valued and whose voices are at the table. And so my message to principals and teachers and superintendents is to come into this with open ears and open hearts. We really need to take a listening stance, to recognize that distributive leadership is important, that our communities all have assets and they bring tremendous amount of value to our schools and students. And so as we look to scale and grow, a lot of it is around the leadership development and kind of the culture change that our chancellor and our mayor are looking to see in our schools, and part of our broader equity and excellence agenda for New York City.
Is a new chancellor on board?
He's extremely excited about this work. We visited a community school together a couple of weeks ago, and his work in San Francisco and in Houston both had significant community school investments and work going on. He really understands the nuance, and I'm excited to work with him on this work.
Well, this sounds very exciting, and I wish you all great success, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Chris Caruso, Executive Director of New York City Community Schools.
Great.
Thanks
Thank you,
for joining
Linda,
us.
for lifting up this issue.
Sure. Don't go away. We'll be right back with our EdBytes. Welcome back to this edition of EdBytes. Choosing the right college is often a source of much anxiety. While we may tell ourselves and our children that in the end they'll be fine wherever they go, new research indicates there is one pitfall to avoid. Going to a college that is less academically rigorous than the student's high school could have negative effects on mental health. Undermatching a student's academic ability relative to high school led to a 27% increase in depression. So it might be a good idea to take into account the overall academic ability of the student body when selecting a college. Chronic absenteeism is linked to poor student academic performance. But with so many factors feeding into it, reducing absenteeism is challenging. A study undertaken in Philadelphia points to a solution: send letters home. The researchers found that parents often underestimate how much school their children miss. But when they are given accurate information about their children's absences, they can be important collaborators in getting their children back to school. The most effective letters told parents how often their child was absent. Overall, the program cost about $6 per household, far less than many other interventions. While a child's self-control has been touted as a major indicator of later academic achievement, new research points to another crucial predictor of success: curiosity and an eagerness to learn new things. These traits were as reliable as self-control as predictors of later kindergarten math and reading achievement. Curiosity was even seen as a mitigator of the achievement gap for low-income children. Just in time for Mother's Day, a new international study looks at the effect of mothers' help with homework. Researchers found that children benefited from their mother's help, but the type of assistance mattered. Giving children help when asked and letting kids work on their own was far more beneficial than sitting down every night to go over homework, even when not asked. Too much help led to children who were less persistent over time. That's it for this edition of EdCast. Join us next time for more conversation about education.
We'd like to hear from you. Please send your thoughts and comments to CUNYEdcast@gmail.com.